Hello and welcome to Movies You Missed Podcast. I'm Vee.
I'm John.
And we are two industry veterans who have been friends for over 25 years, and now we love to recommend movies to you without spoiling them.
That's right, no spoilers here. Not one in 115 episodes.
How you doing today, John?
I'm doing pretty good, but I am also a little bit sad because we just got word the other day that we lost the great Canadian actor Donald Sutherland.
Yes, he was great, and there are many movies that we're fans of that he starred in, and so today we're taking the opportunity to discuss two of them, but they will not be the only two on our podcast. In fact, one of his horror movies is one I'm probably going to pick this October.
Oh, fantastic.
I really appreciate your suggestion of doing this special episode today. It sucks when we have episodes dedicated to people who just passed, but I do like celebrating their work.
I absolutely agree. I think it's going to be a good episode, especially because I think these two movies might be some of the more underrated Donald Sutherland performances that people talk about.
Fully agree. And of course, for those of you who've been here before, we're kind of known for that now. And before we get into these two Donald Sutherland movies, we always like to discuss the new movies we saw in theaters or on streaming this week.
Oh, yes.
And John, did you see anything new this week?
Very sadly, no. It's been a busy week for me. Yeah, I am a little sad about it. I'll be honest, though, there really hasn't been anything in the last week that's been like, you know what, I'm going to go see that and give my time to it. So I don't feel too bad, but I still would have liked to have gone to see a movie. V, as you know, I just started a new job and the schedule is a little wonky, but I'm sure it will get figured out soon and I'll be able to get back to the movies in the next few days. So we'll see what happens, but I'm curious to hear what you went and saw or watched on streaming this week. I know you saw one in theaters.
I did, and I agree with you. There's a little bit of a dry spell right now at the theater.
Just a little bit, yeah.
I think it'll last for a couple weeks, and then we have several awesome July movies coming, including Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah, and Twisters with Glenn Powell.
I'm going to see it even though I think it's blasphemous that they made it.
I am completely on board with that.
But the movie I did see in theaters this week was actually a movie you saw last week. I went and saw Inside Out 2.
Oh. And do you agree with me or do you not agree with me?
I actually don't agree with you.
Wow, okay.
I liked it a lot more than you did.
Interesting.
Now, there were some formulaic parts to it. The overall structure of the movie was very similar to the first one.
Yes, very much so.
But the new emotions were amazing. I really related to what Riley was going through. And I'm wondering, I talked about this with Lindsay, my friend who I saw this with, and her husband Jared.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if there's a little bit of a disconnect because you were never a teenage girl.
I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think so, because I connected with Riley immediately in Inside Out. And I felt that I related to Riley in this one with the whole high school thing, going into a sport and, trying to make friends. And so obviously I'm not a woman or was never a teenage girl, but I don't think that was it. I think, like I said before, it just felt unnecessary to me, and I feel like we could have just left it alone with the end of the first one. But again, yeah. I've talked to a lot of people that have really liked it, and now you have obviously definitely enjoyed it, and I might watch it again once it's on streaming and see if maybe it hits me a little differently. So, everybody takes something different from a movie or even a sequel from, especially when the first one is just so damn good. And like I said, I laughed a lot during Inside Out 2, but I didn't get as emotionally involved with Riley's story as I did the first one. So I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm not upset that you enjoyed it. I'm not upset with anybody that's enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, fantastic. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I'm not trying to come off as you shouldn't like that, like I do with Jurassic World and La La Land. But I'm again glad you liked it. Glad your friends seemed to enjoy it. And tell me a little bit more about what you liked.
I felt very seen in this movie. The internal monologue that she has with herself when anxiety comes onto the scene, and the criticizing she starts with as a teenager. I'm not good enough, and the embarrassment. I loved Embarrassment, played by Paul Hauser. That was great.
Yeah, he was all right.
And it just really spoke to me, and I think it's really important for teenagers to watch this movie. Anybody from about the age of 11 to 17 should absolutely watch this movie.
Yeah, I agree with that.
My niece Ainsley watched it last week. She loved it. I think her older sister Jillian should watch it next.
Huh. So maybe it does hit harder with the female crowd, and because I am an adult male, it doesn't.
Well,
and again, that's fine. But it's just so interesting because I did really connect with Riley in the first one, and she was much younger, and that one came out in 2015, so 9 years ago, and I was still in my 20s.
In my head, that was 3 years ago.
I know, seriously. It really was. It feels that way.
Maybe it's less of a male versus female thing and more of an internal monologue and internal critic thing. I have a very strong internal critic in my head, and so that piece of it was very relevant to me, and it made me feel a little more normal and a little less damaged, I guess is a good way to put it, or defective. And the idea that, no, everybody deals with this, everybody deals with their own internal critic, and I really want to focus more on Joy in my head that is so comforting to Riley. It was so sweet, and the moral of this is wonderful as well. And so it's not as good as the first one. I totally agree. It's not as good as, say, Elemental or some other Pixar movies that we've seen in more recent years that we did really love. But in terms of the more recent releases of Pixar, I thought it was certainly one of their better ones.
Okay. And interesting you say the whole thing about anxiety and the inner monologue. I didn't have necessarily any anxiety or inner monologue until my 20s. I was very much a very outgoing, joyful child and teenager, and I'm sure you remember that about me.
Oh, yeah.
But I got more embarrassment and anxiety in my earlier 20s than I did as a teenager. So maybe that's why, maybe I couldn't actually. And again, I'm not trying to be like, I'm better than anybody. Obviously, that's not what I'm saying. It's just everybody's different. Everybody grows differently. Everybody has, the emotions pop up in certain times of their life. So that could be another reason why, too.
Well, and it just took you a little longer for the world and society and our culture to beat you down into having negative thoughts.
Well, as 23 says in Soul, you can't crush souls here. That's what life on Earth is for.
One of my favorite lines in that entire movie.
Well, good. I'm glad you enjoyed Inside Out, too.
Thank you. I'm really glad I ended up seeing it in theaters because originally I hadn't even planned to.
Yeah. Did you see it in 3D?
I did not.
Oh, that's too bad. The 3D was pretty awesome.
I saved that for Avatar movies.
All right. I get you.
And now it's time to dive into the Donald Sutherland movies that we picked for this week, and I believe John goes first.
Sounds good. Let's get into it. We're not going chronological this episode because I go first, and my movie came out 24 years ago. This movie was written by Ken Kaufman and Howard Klausner, directed by Clint Eastwood, starring Clint Eastwood, Tommy Lee Jones, Donald Sutherland, James Garner, James Cromwell, and Marcia Gay Harden. This is Space Cowboys.
I always forget that Clint Eastwood directed this movie.
I actually did forget that myself because when I started watching it and the credits started rolling and it said directed by Clint Eastwood, that was another revelation. So this is my second Clint Eastwood directed film on Movies You Missed podcast.
But your first in about 110 episodes.
Yes, in a very long time. So I'm excited to revisit this movie because I actually don't think I've seen this movie in at least 22 years. I remember seeing it. I want to say that I was in Hawaii when my parents and my sister and I ended up watching this movie. And we all loved it, thought it was great, thought it was very entertaining and hysterical. And it's been one of those movies, and I know I say this a lot about a lot of movies that I pick. It's like, do I want to own it? Do I not want to own it? Is it something that I would watch all the time? So after this viewing, I'm like, I should have just bought this like 20 years ago because this movie is not only hilarious, but a very entertaining NASA movie. And everybody knows that I'm a big NASA nut, V, yourself included. We love space. So this was a really cool revisit, albeit the fact that Donald Sutherland did just die on the 20th of this month. So to honor him, I wanted to go with this movie. I almost did Animal House, but he's not in it very much, whereas he is a very strong supporting character in this movie, Space Cowboys.
Yes, he is.
And his character is hilarious. So for those of you that have not seen Space Cowboys, you're in for a treat because, again, great movie. This movie opens up with a flight test going on in 1958. It's actually shot in black and white. And I'm sure if you've seen this movie, and I actually was, reminded of it this time around because it's been so long since I've seen it, the voices of these young actors that are on screen are very familiar.
Yes, it's a little bit jarring. It doesn't quite work. I understand what they're trying to do, and it's fine. It only lasts for a couple minutes.
Yeah.
But for me, it was pretty distracting because I was like, that's not his voice. That's Clint Eastwood's voice. ADR over that actor's, who, by the way, that actor was the villain in Die Another Day, the James Bond movie. He did look like a young Clint Eastwood, though.
Oh, wow. I did not catch that because I don't remember Die Another Day very much. I think I've seen it a handful of times, but I couldn't tell you who the villain in Die Another Day was.
Rosamund Pike's in it, too, actually.
That's right. Yeah, you mentioned that when we were talking about another Donald Sutherland movie, Pride and Prejudice, just 2 episodes ago.
That's right.
I actually thought it did work because it kind of brought me into the fact that, okay, so this is Clint Eastwood and Tommy Lee Jones as young men, basically, which I thought it sold pretty well. V seems to think otherwise, and that's totally fine. That's why we're here. All opinions are valid.
Wow, it's early in the episode for that.
I know, right? So anyway, these guys are doing a flight test, and unfortunately it doesn't go as planned. They have to eject, and then they are told by their director, Bob Gerson, that they're pretty much shut down. They're not going to be able to do these tests anymore because of how reckless they were in trying to accomplish this thing. So fast forward 42 years, and NASA is now having a bit of trouble with a satellite that seems to be failing. And Clint Eastwood's character, Frank Corvin, is an engineer who designed a guidance system for NASA that is also on this satellite. And we later come to find out that this satellite actually is not really part of NASA. It's a Russian satellite. And Frank is very perturbed as to why his guidance system ended up, or even how it ended up on this satellite. So what is NASA planning to do? Well, Bob Gerson thinks that he needs to get a team to fly up into space and basically stop this satellite from falling to Earth. NASA officials reach out to Frank Corvin. Frank Corvin, played by Clint Eastwood, decides that he actually needs his original team of Hawk Hawkins, Jerry O'Neill, and Tank Sullivan to actually get this done correctly and get this done in a timely manner. They're hoping to get this done in the next few weeks. And Frank is very much of the mind that you're not going to train anybody that quickly, so why not just use me and the guys that know how to actually do this thing? And this scene is great between James Cromwell and Clint Eastwood.
Team Daedalus. Jerry, Hawk, Tank, send us up.
This is a joke, am I right?
It's no joke. We were the best of the best. Even you'll admit to that, Bob.
Uh-huh. And how old are you, Frank?
Old enough to know your ass is in a sling.
Sarah, would you excuse us for a minute? This is about to become a personal matter.
I know you're running out of options. Otherwise, you'd have never come to me, Bob.
You sure as hell got that right.
All right, you've got a satellite that's going to come down in 34 days. Too big to retrieve. And for some reason, you don't want it to come back and crash in the atmosphere. I did the design system. I'm the man to fix it for you.
I don't know how to break this to you, Frank, but you're an old man.
Yeah? Well, this old man's all you've got. You know that, and I know that. Hell, you sent up Glenn, didn't you? I'll be waiting to hear from you.
You became a senior citizen 5 years ago.
4.
Oh, hell, Frank. For once in your life, try to be a team player. Train the crew if you want to, but let the professionals at NASA fix that design flaw.
There is no flaw. Well, this is a hands-on job, and I haven't got time to train somebody to come up in your time frame. So you'll just have to send up Team Daedalus. You can take it, or you can leave it. Clock's ticking, Bob. And I'm only getting older.
And I love that scene between Cromwell and Eastwood. I think it's hilarious. It really shows the tension because everybody apparently at NASA knows that Frank Corvin was not so much a team player. He was very much of the mind that he's really the only one that can do these sort of things. And another reason NASA needs these guys is because the technology and this guidance system is so old that they're really the only kind of guys that can actually get up there and shut this thing down properly and understand all the coding that went into getting this guidance system on this particular satellite.
Yes, Frank is stubborn, but I would never want to work for Bob Gerson. He seems like such a prick.
Oh, hell yeah, he does. Especially early on in 1958 when we first meet him.
He's such a smarmy politician, and you can tell he's just failing his way up the ladder.
I think Frank calls him a politician at one point, too, in the movie, and it's very entertaining. So, of course, NASA, after much convincing, agrees that these 4 gentlemen are really the guys that can fix the problem that needs to be fixed. And we are introduced to Hawkins, played by Tommy Lee Jones, which is a very entertaining sequence. He's a pilot out in the middle of nowhere, and more of a crop-dusting pilot, but he takes people out on flights. And there's this one crazy kid that's like, I want to be scared out of my mind on my birthday. I want to do flips and rolls and tugs in the sky. And did you actually notice who one of those pilots was that recommended that this kid go talk to Hawkins?
I didn't.
Oh, this was John Hamm's first theatrical performance. When he showed up, I was like, that's John Hamm. And of course, it's very hard to miss. Well, apparently you did miss him. No offense that you missed him, but
I was just excited to see Tommy Lee Jones.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And 24 years ago, and even still, Tommy Lee Jones is great.
Which is funny, that's one of John Hamm's earliest roles, because his most recent role is in Top Gun Maverick, and that test flight scene, which is the first scene of the entire movie, reminds me of the first scene of Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of reminded me of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension as well.
That's right.
These there's a lot of inspiration being taken from other movies to make other movies, so I think that's pretty cool. So then we're introduced to Jerry O'Neill, played by the great Donald Sutherland, rest in peace. I love his introduction because from the age of maybe 12 to just a few years ago, have ridden on Viper over 1,000 times at Magic Mountain in Santa Clarita. Yeah, I love that roller coaster. Amy was a big fan of that roller coaster when we had season passes to Magic Mountain. I also worked at Magic Mountain in several capacities and would just be able to jump the line because I worked there, had a blue shirt, and I would usually get in the front or the back. The back was always the best. I know a lot of people hate the back of roller coasters, but my God, the back on Viper was amazing. And I just love that Jerry is eating a banana halfway through the corkscrew sequence, while he's riding this roller coaster. And we find out that Jerry is also an engineer of sorts as well, and he's working on, making roller coasters smoother and making them a lot more enjoyable instead of these rickety things that still, to this day, need a lot of attention.
My favorite part of his introduction was Clint Eastwood thinking that young woman was his daughter, and then Donald Sutherland walks up and
was so great.
Kisses her. It turns out it's
kisses
his
her
girlfriend.
right on the mouth. Yeah, that was hysterical. Yeah, and you can just see in Clint's face, he's like, oh, it's like that moment of, whoa, okay then. There's also a NASA official, William Devane. I'm not sure if you recognized William Devane in this movie, maybe not by name. He is in my favorite Christopher Nolan film of all time. He's in Interstellar. He plays a NASA official in Interstellar, and he's the one that's like, you're going to have to be specific, Mr. Cooper, right now, when they find NORAD.
I love William Devane, and I always remember him from the Mel Gibson movie Payback that I'm going to be introducing you to.
Ah, wonderful. And William Devane, he plays Eugene Davis in this movie. He is a NASA flight director, and he's very much on the spectrum, kind of like Gerson, that these old guys are not going to be able to do this, and his team of younger men should be the one to do this. And if there's any sort of glitch, if anybody fails their physical, they're grounded, and he's going to send his team of young guys up there to fix this problem. So for the rest of the movie, we are treated to a lot of great comedy, very much Armageddon-esque sort of things as well, because, they have to go through their physicals, and these guys also are reconnecting after however many years. We also find out that Frank and Hawk had a falling out, and they hadn't talked to each other in 12 years. And like I said, for the rest of the movie, these guys are trying to prove to NASA that they are the right for the job and that they can get this handled and go up in space and fix the satellite. Like I said before, this was a fantastic revisit for me. Like I said, I don't think I've watched this movie in 22 years, but made me laugh the entire time. The entire length of the movie is very entertaining. The movie's over 2 hours long. It doesn't drag. I never felt like there was a moment where it's like, well, we really don't need this. It's all very meticulous. It's all very well done. Clint Eastwood was actually not originally going to direct this movie, but while he was in the producer's seat, he and the rest of the producers of the movie, they could not land on a director that had the confidence to shoot any of the outer space sequences because they thought it was going to be too difficult. So Clint Eastwood was like, I guess I'm directing this son of a bitch then. And I'm glad that he did, because
those
he
were
does
probably
a fantastic
his exact
job.
words too.
Oh, probably. Well, I'm directing this son of a bitch then.
Exactly.
That's my terrible Clint Eastwood.
That's actually not bad. That's pretty good.
So, V, I've said it twice now. What did you think of the revisit of Space Cowboys?
I loved this movie. I've forgotten how funny it was. I hadn't seen it in about 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Every scene of them being tested is so funny. The physicals, the flight simulator, and then they go out to the bar, and that's hilarious too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, all these guys together, and I love that every single one of them has their own cute little old guy characteristics to it, and Donald Sutherland is so funny in this movie and so suave, and he hits on every single woman that he runs into, which is great. Yeah. And he might be the Lothario, but I've always had a thing for Tommy Lee Jones.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Ever since I saw The Fugitive when I was 10 years old.
Wow. All right.
Yep. I fell in love with him.
You fell hard young.
I did. And Harrison Ford, actually.
Oh, yeah.
But I'd already seen him in Indiana Jones, so that was already a thing. But
sure.
The Fugitive was my introduction to Tommy Lee, and whew, yeah, I don't care what age he is.
That's hilarious. I think you said the same thing about James Garner when we discussed Atlantis and the Lost Empire also. Or maybe it was just the animated character that his voice was put to. He
was drawn correctly, let's put it that way.
Oh, that's funny.
So yeah, I definitely recommend this movie. In fact, if anyone wants to watch a movie where amateurs are shot into space by NASA, instead of Armageddon, watch this instead. It's a better movie.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Every opinion's valid, I suppose. To an extent, I can agree with that. While watching this, I was like, oh, they definitely, like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, they do kind of pull a little bit from Armageddon, and that's fine. You know, I still love Armageddon, and we're still going to do it on this show, so you're going to have to sit through it.
Fine.
Yes,
I will not be able to get that song out of my head for like 2 months after it, but whatever.
Don't want to miss a thing?
Yeah.
It's a good one.
No, it's not.
Well,
it's way overplayed.
I remember actually somebody asked me after I had proposed to Amy, they were like, so what's your wedding song going to be? An Aerosmith song from Armageddon? I'm like, no. No, I'm not that cliche.
No, you're not.
I might have proposed at California Adventure, but it still wasn't in front of the castle like everybody else does.
Right? And I love that Rade Srbejić's in this movie. I love him in everything he's in. He's Boris the Blade or Boris the Bullet Dodger in Snatch.
Yes.
He also is in a small part in Eurotrip, one of my earlier picks.
Yes.
Miami Vice, #1 new show, which we quote a lot on this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Where's the beef?
Love that guy. And he plays a very serious Russian general in this movie. It's a great addition.
Does. Yeah, he really was. There's a lot of great small parts in this movie. Marcia Gay Harden was great. I thought she was awesome.
Amazing in every single thing she does.
I haven't seen her in a lot, but I will agree that everything I've seen her in, she's pretty great.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Courtney B. Vance is in this movie.
Yeah.
He is awesome. And there's one other actor in this movie that a lot of people, I doubt, will know by name. Nils Allen Stewart. He plays the thug at the bar that tells the guys not to continually hit on the waitress. So you recognize him, V, I imagine.
Yeah, he's a character actor who's usually the muscle.
Yes, and he is in one of the greatest Jim Carrey films from 1994, The Mask, and he has that great scene with Jim Carrey where Jim Carrey keeps dying after getting shot. I love that sequence. It's so hysterical.
He pretends to get the Oscar.
Yes, yeah, he does the whole Sally Field thing.
Oh yeah, isn't he holding Jim Carrey?
Yeah, as he's dying. Tell Tiny Tim I won't be home this Christmas. So funny.
You love me. You really love me.
But anyway, back to Space Cowboys, because we are definitely talking about that. And we'll talk about The Mask, I'm sure, in the future. But again, great supporting cast. Everybody's very convincing, including our 4 heroes, Clint Eastwood, Tommy Lee Jones, James Garner, and Donald Sutherland. This film was a little bit tough on James Garner and Donald Sutherland. James Garner ended up dislocating his shoulder at one point.
Oof.
Yes, and Donald Sutherland suffered from a cracked knee. And I don't know what sequence that could have been unless they really were twisting and turning him around on Viper, even though that is a pretty intense roller coaster.
Well, those sets were pretty complex because they were playing NASA, right? And so there's lots of ladders, there's containers, there's lots of shit you could trip on that maybe he fell and they were all cement floors. Maybe that's what happened.
You know, sets are dangerous places. Now, Clint Eastwood had a nickname for this movie, and you know how a lot of movies are delivered under a different name to theaters or they have a working title?
Yeah, absolutely.
This one was Geezer Power.
Perfect.
I thought that was pretty hilarious. Mission control in this movie is actually built off of blueprints that NASA provided the production. So that's pretty awesome.
That's fantastic that they were willing to work with them.
Yes. Oh, NASA worked very closely with the production of this movie. They actually offered them to use the Vomit Comet, which I don't know if you are aware of what that is.
Oh, yeah. I want to go up in it so bad.
I would love to go up in the Vomit Comet. Clint Eastwood actually said that he didn't want not only himself, but the other three to go up in it because of how old they were. And he was afraid that they actually might get sick from being in the Vomit Comet.
Wow, so all of the scenes with them in space and looking like they're in zero-G, that's all just them faking it?
That's
acting really crazy, well done.
Right?
I mean, a lot of times when people are either acting drunk or in zero-G, it's a little overdone, and
sure.
And so I'm very impressed by what they did. But of course, they're all very seasoned, very talented men.
Yes. And, there's a lot of wires involved and stuff like that. And I couldn't actually find any information if there was any underwater shooting because, there's the NASA pool that a lot of the astronauts do train in. And that's actually used in Armageddon. But we'll talk about that when we talk about Armageddon. But yeah, it's very convincing stuff. And like you said, all of these guys are seasoned actors and had been acting for 50 years before they shot this movie.
That's true.
And it's crazy that Clint Eastwood and Tommy Lee Jones, they are the two living of the four that are in this movie. The top bill, anyway.
I miss James Garner, too.
Yeah, he was great. He was really awesome. And actually, the other day, my wife and I were thrifting, and I found a VHS copy of Support Your Local Sheriff.
Hey, awesome.
Yeah. I didn't buy it, though.
That's
I probably
okay.
should have,
No,
but maybe
I
in the future.
That. It's okay. You don't have a VHS player, so.
Not yet. I will have one.
Okay.
Oh, and speaking of the four top-billed gentlemen in this movie, Donald Sutherland and Tommy Lee Jones were actually the youngest of the four.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Going back to NASA being involved, they used real simulators on this movie for the space shuttle, which is pretty awesome.
Those simulators were so badass. I want to fly those as well. And when they were doing the simulator of all of the G's and Tommy Lee Jones and Clint were having that contest, I was like, this is the part where John and I would fail the physicals and our hearts would explode.
Absolutely. Yep. My blood would probably liquefy and I would just bleed out of every orifice.
Wait, isn't your blood already liquid?
You know what I mean. My veins would liquefy.
Yes,
That's what I should have said.
I do know what you mean. But yeah, that's the
My
moment
blood is liquid.
We'd be kicked out of NASA.
Yeah, but I do like that moment. Yeah, because which one of us passed out first?
Yeah, that's great. Just keep going faster and faster.
Oh, man. And I can't wait to actually introduce you to another NASA movie called Rocket Man with Harlan Williams. There's a hysterical scene with that sort of simulator
I love
involved.
That in Space Cowboys, they're like, ooh, all our wrinkles are disappearing.
Yeah.
Makes you look way younger.
Good. Oh, so funny. And doing my research for this movie, I found out that Clint Eastwood, every time that he would roll, would tell the cast to improvise for the scene before they actually shot the real thing. But he never did shoot another take.
Ooh, so it's
most of
mostly...
the dialogue in this movie is improvised by all of the guys in this movie.
Fantastic.
Pretty freaking awesome. And after Clint Eastwood would move on from the improvised scenes, Donald Sutherland would approach him and be like, how come we're not shooting the scripted part? And he goes, oh, well, we got it. We're moving on. So that was it.
I would love to be on a Clint Eastwood set. He was so chill.
Yeah, chill as all hell. And a friend of mine, actually, Ashley, worked on The Mule with him. And I have not seen The Mule, but I hear it's a great movie. It came out, I think, 4 or 5 years ago now. She said that the days were within an 8 to 10 hour, including, hair and makeup and all that stuff. And while post-production was going on for Space Cowboys, the editor said that Clint Eastwood would do 35 to 40 setups a day.
Whoa.
Yeah, that is below average.
So did they finish the shoot on schedule or were they late?
I actually couldn't find any information about that, but I'm going to say on schedule or early because that's all I've ever heard of Clint Eastwood sets.
Exactly. It's just bonkers to think that they could have. But that's the thing. Clint Eastwood doesn't have to prove shit to anyone, which is how he can be so calm on set and be like, this is fine.
Yep. When we got it. I love the whole thing that when they're ready to roll, the camera has been rolling already, and Clint Eastwood just says, whenever you're ready. And then when they're done, he'll just look at camera and cast and be like, that'll do it, and move on. There's no, like, screaming action, no screaming cut. Of course, we all know that he has earned the right to be that way, but that's how it should be. And I've heard similar things about the Coen Brothers sets. They're between 8 and 10 hours, and they're very chill about their directing, and it's pretty wild. And I'm actually excited to discuss The Rock coming up in a few weeks, which we were originally supposed to be doing this episode, but we unfortunately did lose Donald Sutherland, so we are going to honor him and have a good time doing it. And when we talk about The Rock, we'll get into how Michael Bay directs.
Oh, God, I can only imagine.
It's interesting.
Uh-huh.
There was a big screening for this movie, and a lot of real astronauts actually screened the film. I mean, why not? NASA was involved.
Hell yeah.
And all of them were incredibly impressed with how realistic all of the space stuff looked and how realistic the actors really portrayed being astronauts.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. The cast also came very prepared during their training with the NASA trainer Yvonne Kagel. She was incredibly impressed with all of them because not only were they really ready and prepared to start going through NASA training, basically, for this movie, she was just very taken by the fact that they were as excited as they were getting to make this movie.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And there are 300 special effects shots in this movie.
I believe it.
Yes,
They
a lot of
hold
them...
up pretty well, actually.
They really do. Yeah. When I was watching this and they get to space and they're doing the spacewalks, like, this is really, really good for 2000. Now, granted, we had seen a lot of really good special effects from, 1993, 1989, Roger Rabbit, Jurassic Park, Independence Day, Men in Black, and now we're looking at, 2000, and, of course, there's still some really terrible CGI even now.
That's what boggles my mind. It's in 2024, how do you make bad CGI considering how many years we've had? I mean, looking back at The Mummy compared to some newer movies, I'm like, what the hell?
Yes.
The Mummy has better effects? How is this happening? But the only part that I was like, that's kind of fake was where Clint just begins his first spacewalk. When he comes out the door, I was like, that doesn't look too great. But otherwise, every other special effects shot, I was like, damn, that's holding up really well.
Yeah, it really did. And all of the outer space stuff was entirely computer generated, and even including the space suits. So all of the actors' faces, very similarly to Gravity just a few years ago. Mm-hmm. Alfonso Cuarón and Emmanuel Lubezki ended up doing Gravity by lighting their faces and then superimposing it over a CGI body, which pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah, it worked.
Jerry O'Neill's character, who is Donald Sutherland, was actually originally offered to Sean Connery. Speaking of The Rock.
He could be hitting on women at that age and
definitely
still be doing fine.
He could hit on me.
Yeah, right. Jesus.
Welcome to space. And Jack Nicholson was actually offered the role of Tank Sullivan, but that role ultimately went to James Garner.
Okay, but Jack could have definitely played Jerry's character being
absolutely.
Lothario.
Yeah.
Especially in the year 2000. Oh, it would have been perfect.
That actually would have been a pretty good match. But, we're very glad that it went to Donald Sutherland.
Absolutely. He was perfect.
Movie, it really was, yeah. This movie does reunite Clint Eastwood and Donald Sutherland. They were in the movie Kelly's Heroes together.
Yes, a great film. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have not seen Kelly's Heroes, but I do kind of want to now. Is it a Western?
It's not, actually. It's about soldiers in World War II sneaking across enemy lines.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I should put it on the list at some point. It's definitely one I thought about picking today for Donald.
Oh, well, maybe in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Because I thought about doing Cold Mountain also, but he's not in that movie for very long either.
And that movie is not good.
Yes, it is.
It has terrible accents.
Doesn't mean it's not a good movie.
Okay.
Now, there's a running joke in this movie about James Garner's character Tank. Garner, like I just said, plays Tank in this movie. Clint Eastwood fought a character named Tank in Every Which Way But Loose.
Okay.
Donald Sutherland played a tank commander in Kelly's Heroes.
And didn't Every Which Way But Loose have a monkey in it?
I have no idea. I've never seen it. Hadn't even heard of it before.
Which is the only reason I bring it up is because there's a monkey at the beginning of this movie.
That's right, there is. And that actually is one of the main reasons why Clint Eastwood's character is so pissed off at Gerson early on in the movie.
Yes, Every Which Way But Loose does in fact have an orangutan.
Ah, very cool.
I knew there's a monkey in it.
Yeah, you were right.
Well, I guess a primate, sorry.
Now, here's a couple of things about our friend Donald Sutherland. Rest in peace, sir. Donald Sutherland, on most film and TV sets, would go to the director and producers and suggest that they shoot the opening of all of his episodes and all of his movies at the end of the shoot, only because of the fact that they would already be in a rhythm to get the characters going, and because he felt that the tone would be set for the audience that way, which I actually fully agree with, because there are so many times I feel that when you're watching a movie, regardless of who's in it, you can tell what scene was shot first. Mm-hmm. And if like you're shooting the opening of a movie on like day one, now of course 28 Days Later is shot chronologically. There's a lot of movies that are shot chronologically, and that's fine, and a lot of times it works out. But to an extent, I agree with Donald Sutherland. Shoot the beginning of the movie last, because you've already built this rapport. You've been on that set for so long. I think that that's actually a really cool little tidbit about Donald Sutherland.
Yeah, I can see the argument there.
Sweet. In 1979, Donald Sutherland had meningitis and actually did die for a number of minutes.
Holy shit.
Yeah, he was brought back, and he was very grateful to, of course, be brought back, just like anybody else would be. And he said that he had a very intense out-of-body experience, but he didn't go into a whole lot of detail about his out-of-body experience.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty wild, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever had one of those. I know I've definitely felt weird after anesthesia, after the open heart surgeries that I've had, but I don't think I've ever, nobody's ever told me. Maybe my parents know if I've, died. But technically, they do stop your heart for open heart surgery. So I would say that I've probably died twice at this point.
They stop your heart for open heart surgery if you have to be put on bypass for your valve replacements. Did they do that?
Yeah, they put me on a heart-lung machine.
So you were definitely dead.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, that's why I'm so fucked up.
Well, I was put on a heart-lung bypass machine too, so we could be fucked up together.
And we are.
Yeah, I mean, that's why this podcast works, right?
Absolutely. And a couple other things about Donald Sutherland. He was considered for one of the craziest characters from the 90s in a film that won the first horror Best Picture winner at the Oscars. Ooh. He was considered for Hannibal Lecter, which in an alternate universe, I would love to see.
I would love to see him as a psychopathic serial killer in general. That would be great.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
He would have been so menacing, especially because he's 6'4".
Yeah, he's a tall son of a gun. He received his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame on January 26th of 2011, and his 20th birthday coincides with the day that Walt Disney opened Disneyland.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I know. Pretty awesome. And you know me, you as well, V. We love Disney.
I love Disney movies. I am not a fan of the park at all.
Weird.
All of the park. I don't like large crowds.
Oh, okay.
So
gotcha.
That's why.
All right. And a few films that I enjoy that star Donald Sutherland. Moonfall, most recently. It's not a great movie, but it is a lot of fun. He's also in a film with Colin Farrell and Salma Hayek called Ask the Dust, which was a decent movie. I remember seeing a screening of it, but I never did see it again, so maybe it's not that decent. But he is in it, and I remember liking it, so we'll just leave it at that. He's in a great World War II made-for-TV movie called Uprising, and he's in one hell of a crazy-ass movie with Denzel Washington and John Goodman called Fallen. So that's a little bit of filmography of Donald Sutherland for those of you that may not know too much else about him. V, I know you're going to mention a few more of his movies. This film, Space Cowboys, was released on August 4th of 2000, $65 million budget.
Given the star power plus all of the visual effects, that's not that much.
No, it's not. But for 2000, I think it kind of makes sense.
But remember, the year 2000 is when What Lies Beneath was made, and that's always been our litmus test, and that was $100 million.
I know. It's so crazy.
I love using that as a standard of expensive movies.
It makes sense. It does. The domestic box office for Space Cowboys was $90 million.
Okay.
And the worldwide box office came in at $128.8 million.
I bet you it did great with DVD sales, though, because that's how I first watched it.
I'm sure it did fantastic at Blockbuster and Hollywood Video, and on DVD sales and VHS sales, because VHSs were still being produced in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a couple of the highest-grossing films of 2000, Mission Impossible 2, number 1, number 2, Gladiator, number 3, Castaway, number 4, What Women Want, number 5, Disney's Dinosaur, number 6, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, number 7, Meet the Parents, number 8, The Perfect Storm, number 9, X-Men, number 10, V, your pick for the first ever horror episode of Movies You Missed podcast, What Lies Beneath.
Speaking of.
Yes, of course. The 11th highest grossing film was Scary Movie. 12th, Charlie's Angels, which I still think is a lot of fun. Number 15, Gone in 60 Seconds. Number 18, The Patriot. Number 20, Miss Congeniality. Number 27, Scream 3. Number 31, Remember the Titans. And the 33rd highest grossing film of 2000, my pick for this week, of Space Cowboys.
Awesome. 33rd. That's great.
Yeah, top 50. Congrats to everybody involved. Mr. Donald Sutherland, thank you for gracing us with your acting presence and charm and hilarity over the last 40-plus years. Now, V, I think we can go back in time to the early 90s with your pick for this week.
All right. Sounds good, John. Thank you so much for reminding me of the greatness that is Space Cowboys. I had a lot of fun revisiting that film.
Anytime.
I'm rolling back 8 years from Space Cowboys to 1992 to a forgotten gem. This is a very underrated, very low budget, very capital B horror movie.
Oh, big time B.
This is extremely campy. If you're a fan of Buckaroo Banzai or The Blob or The Attack of the 50-Foot Woman, things like that, this is right up your alley because this is the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
My first experience with any Buffy the Vampire Slayer stuff at all.
And terming it an experience is certainly the right word.
Yes.
We'll get into John's opinion in a little bit, but first let me dive in for those of you who haven't ever seen the show or watched this film. It stars Christy Swanson, Donald Sutherland, Rutger Hauer, Paul Rubens, aka Pee Wee Herman. And it also has some very early roles of a bunch of people, including Hilary Swank and Ben Affleck. I don't know if you caught him. Of course.
Oh, yeah. Right when they were on the court and the camera pan was like, you gotta be kidding me.
Yep.
And I'm going to say, Hilary Swank. Oh, I love Hilary Swank.
She just seemed like such a bitch in this movie. They're the type of high school girls I would never want to spend time with.
No, definitely not. I'm just saying, she looked gorgeous.
And Stephen Root was in this movie too.
Yes, he was. Oh, he was great.
And so diving into Buffy the Vampire Slayer, it starts off very early Valley Girls. This is the beginning of the idea of Clueless, I think. And the first 20 minutes of this movie are extreme in its stupidity because these girls are so awful, so vapid, so insufferable. And I even texted John, I was like, give it 20 minutes because what we're doing is setting up the character development that's going to happen to Buffy because, in fact, she's one of these girls in the beginning. She's such a bitch. She's so shallow. She doesn't care about anything but fashion and is definitely self-involved. But that's to set up how she grows as a person because, in fact, a vampire has come to town. And every lifetime, a slayer is chosen to do battle with vampires. For any of you who has ever seen an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, those words are used in the intro to every episode. And,
oh, really?
Yeah, and unfortunately, Buffy is this generation's slayer. And so this out-of-place, kind of creepy older gentleman shows up to town. And this is where we meet Donald Sutherland's character of Merrick. And I absolutely love this introduction because she actually reacts in a smart way of like, who the hell are you? And I'm not going anywhere with you.
Yeah, that was good.
God! You scared me to death. Where the hell did you come from?
That was very impressive. The tumbling.
What? Oh, I used to do gymnastics. Are you looking for somebody?
I was looking for you, actually.
Why? Am I in trouble or something? Because if I am, I didn't do it.
No, you're not in trouble. I am. I'm years late. You should have been taught, prepared. But I wasn't certain until just now that it was you.
What are you talking about?
I'm saying that I've been searching everywhere for you, Buffy.
Why?
To bring you your birthright.
My birthright? Is that like a trust fund or something?
I think it'll be easier for you to understand this birthright if I show it to you. All right? So you come with me now to the graveyard.
No. My trust fund's in the graveyard? God, what's your damage?
Buffy?
You're one of those skanky old men that, like, attacks little girls and stuff, right? Well, forget you.
My name is Merrick, and you have been chosen, Buffy.
Chosen to go to the graveyard. Why don't you just take the first runner-up, okay?
Everything depends on you, Buffy. Now, you must come with me now to the graveyard while there's still time.
Time to do what?
Time to stop the killing. To stop the vampires.
And I don't know if you noticed in the beginning of this film, but when they're at the mall and they're talking about what they're going to go do, they actually discuss going to the movies, and they're each grading the different movie theaters in town and how some of them have bad popcorn and this one has bad sound. And I'm like, well, John and I have had a conversation like that before.
Oh, yeah. I won't go to the theater in town if the movies are playing in 3 of the theaters that are in that movie theater because the sound sucks and the screen is too dark.
Yes, I have a spreadsheet on my phone for every single screen at my local Cinemark that says exactly what row I should be sitting in based on what theater I'm in.
We are literally the same person.
Hence the podcast.
Yeah.
And what follows is Buffy finally accepting her destiny, which is to become the Slayer, and getting trained by Merrick, and Merrick having to deal with the 21st century Slayer and what all that entails, including her rejecting her birthright, basically, and saying, no, I don't want to deal with this. All I want to do is be on the cheerleading squad and plan this dance. I want to go to Europe, marry Christian Slater, and die.
Yeah.
And then poor Merrick has to deal with this. And unfortunately, this is real. And the vampires are in town, and they're led by Rutger Hauer, which is awesome.
Pretty funny, but I will say that his mustache was awful.
It was so awful.
No, it was so bad.
He's wearing red lipstick to make him more pale, and it's hilarious.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I fell in love with Rutger Hauer when I watched Lady Hawk. It's a fantastic 80s fantasy movie that might be on the list, but it's very 80s, so it'd have to be the right episode to pick that movie.
Okay.
And then, of course, he also is in Blade Runner and has the speech that everybody who on movie Twitter and all these film guys always love to quote, the tears in the rain, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. It's very overdone, like Aerosmith's I Don't Want to Miss a Thing.
Yes.
His number 2 guy is Paul Rubens, a.k.a. Pee Wee Herman. And I love him in this movie. He's hysterical. Every scene he's in is really funny. There's a lot of one-liners that are very campy, but also fun. At one point, he loses his arm, and there's a lot of jokes about that, which I thought were really funny, too. And also, another side character shows up, a senior who is a total deadbeat and a bit of a burnout, played by Luke Perry.
Pike.
His name's Pike in this movie.
So stupid.
And unfortunately, yes. And unfortunately, his friend, played by David Arquette, gets turned into a vampire. And so Luke Pike is actually thrown into the middle of this battle and gets to know Buffy a little bit and Merrick because they keep saving his ass. And he joins the fight. And one of my favorite lines in this whole movie is when one of the high schoolers gets turned into a vampire and he's like, now I'm a god. And Luke Perry stabs him in the back and the stakes coming out the front and he goes, and now you're a coat rack.
Yeah.
It's stuff like that.
Man.
It's stupid, it's ridiculous, but it's campy, and if you like campy, you're going to love this film.
It is certainly campy and certainly enjoyable.
Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And so, yes, before we go any further, I've been eagerly awaiting, because I had a little bit of trepidation. I really want to hear your opinion.
Well, I did enjoy it. I thought it was a very entertaining movie. Again, I have never seen an episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but I do remember seeing this movie like at Blockbuster and Hollywood Video and even at Amoeba, on VHS and DVD. And I was just like, okay, so this has got to be where Buffy the Vampire Slayer came from. Like there, and I did do minimal research, which I know we usually don't do on each other's movies, but I had to know if there was like a graphic novel or something like that. So I just went to IMDb to see who wrote the movie, and very unfortunately for me to find out who the writer of this movie was. Of course, though, he created Buffy the Vampire Slayer, this movie and the TV show. It was an original idea. Like, it wasn't based off of anything. So I liked that about it. I thought Christy Swanson was very enjoyable to watch.
I figured
in many ways. Yeah, in more ways than one. Like I said, I thought Hilary Swank was great. I thought the foursome talking about the different movie theaters getting into the elevator was hilarious. I will say, though, that I get it. It's 1992. It's very camp style. But the whole thing with the red lipstick was just a little bit ridiculous. Amy was sitting with me. She goes, how come he's... Did they all just drink Kool-Aid?
That's what it looks
right
like.
right when she said that, I was like, my God, it literally looks like me when I was like 6 and like just poured Kool-Aid all over my damn face.
Which, in fairness, it wasn't HD back then, right? Like,
no, of course not. No, yeah.
We didn't have 1080p back then.
No, we didn't. Yeah, and this was, I think, I rented it on Apple, so it was definitely an HD conversion. I loved Donald Sutherland showing up. I liked the exposition setup, and I liked the whole thing about, did you have a dream that you were another person? You know, like that whole thing was cool.
Then he throws a knife at her face.
Yeah, that was good.
You were supposed to meet me an hour ago.
I told you that I have practice.
I told you to skip it.
Listen, I think there's been a big mistake, all right? I mean, I appreciate that there are real vampires and that you're on this big holy mission, but obviously somebody read their tea leaves wrong, because I'm not your girl. And I don't think I'm up to it. And just between you and me, neither do you.
It is true. You have missed years of training.
See?
And you are undisciplined, frivolous.
Don't I know it?
Quite probably the most vacuous choice in my entire...
Okay, I think we both get the point.
Right. And I don't think there's anything more for us to say.
Guess not.
Oh, yes. There is one thing.
What?
This. Rebel.
You threw a knife at my head.
Yes, I had to show you.
But you threw a knife at my head.
And you caught it. Only the chosen one could have caught it.
And the whole training thing was fun and entertaining. Just some of the fight sequences, there's just too much space between Christy Swanson and the person that she's trying to take down. It's like, oh boy. But again, 1992, campy, right? So it's not like this is really meant to be taken seriously. Yeah, no, definitely not. But going back to the red lips thing, vampire movies, even Interview with a Vampire, Underworld, I've never seen a Twilight movie, but they don't walk around literally just like holding their mouths open like a jaguar to show their teeth. So I thought that was kind of ridiculous, and just the whole like that thing was really stupid. But overall, I'd give the movie like a C+. I might watch it again in the future. It could be a Halloween thing, but I don't know if I enjoyed it that much. Like I enjoyed it for sure. Donald Sutherland was great. Yeah, cast was good. The Ben Affleck cameo was hilarious. And oh gosh, a total 90s, like, oh, that jacket is so lush. They're like wearing leather jackets and spandex and bodysuits, like Jane Fonda workout videos like all around town. Oh, and the scene where they're actually on Hollywood Boulevard and the girls are leaving that movie theater. I've been to that movie theater.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, it no longer exists. I mean, this movie was 30 plus years ago now. And that used to be, that movie theater was a pretty cool movie theater. And then it became a dollar theater, and now it's an LA Fitness. So I've been in that location
Globo
many
Gym's
times.
in there now.
Yeah, well, they are better than us, and they know it.
Well, and how about the scene where Pike's trying to drive away from them in his van, and it's shot in that part of Griffith Park that every single
for sure
driving stunt is done, and we've both been there at different shoots, and I'm like, oh yeah, I recognize the hell out of this field.
Definitely. And I thought it was hilarious after David Arquette's character gets turned. He's like floating outside of his like second story when he's like, "Let me in, I'm hungry. Let me in." And Pike's just like, "Dude, go away!" Like it was just,
you're floating. What's wrong with you? Get out of here!
Like, what are you doing, man? That was pretty ridiculous. And I don't know what it is about 90s movies, but why? I mean, I look, I have my white noise machine. I listen to like soft music to go to sleep. But in that scene, when David Arquette's floating around and Pike is supposed to be sleeping, he's got like a tape deck on, like really loud, whatever the hell music that's supposed to be. I don't know if that's supposed to be rock music or like a really terrible version of a metal song. And that scene in Griffith Park when he's trying to get the vampires off his van. what the hell was that song?
It's like it's adults in the 90s picking songs that they think are cool and they're not.
There you go.
That's
yeah,
what it
for
was.
sure.
They're
for
totally
sure.
out of touch, and they picked that music thinking they were cool.
Yeah. So, like I said, C+, enjoyable. Donald Sutherland was great. Christy Swanson was awesome. But yeah, who knows if I'll ever watch it again.
I'm just glad you had a good time watching it.
Oh, yeah.
That's all that really
for sure.
matters for introducing a movie to each other, right? It's like, at least the first time was a good time.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
It's so funny because I've been watching this movie since I was probably 10.
Oh, wow.
I probably started watching it a couple years after it came out because my sister really liked it. And of course, my older sisters also watched Beverly Hills 90210, which made Luke Perry famous.
There you go.
And I never watched that show, but
yeah, I've never seen an episode.
Watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer over the years, I was like, I don't really get it. Why is Luke Perry such a heartthrob? Why does everybody love him? And then watching it again this time for the first time in probably, again, same as your movie, like 15 years. I haven't seen this film. And when he walks in those doors towards the end of the movie and his hair's slicked back, I realized what the big deal was.
Ah, okay.
I was sold
That's
on Luke
funny.
Perry.
There you go.
But yes, you did mention, unfortunately, this movie and the show Buffy the Vampire Slayer was written by Joss Whedon, who we now know is a giant piece of shit, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And speaking of graphic novels or comic books, he was so frustrated by how much of his original script was being re-edited, mishandled, completely changed by the producers, that he eventually left set during the production and never came back.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, and he wrote a graphic novel called Origin that is true to his original screenplay and is a bit different than the movie.
Wow.
And this is actually going to say a lot more about Donald Sutherland now that we know the kind of man that Joss Whedon is, because Joss Whedon found Donald Sutherland extremely difficult to be around.
Oh, really?
Donald rewrote most of his dialogue and scenes, similar, talking about space cowboys and improvising, right?
Yeah.
Joss Whedon absolutely hated it. He didn't like retooling of his script. He didn't like that Donald Sutherland was improvising. And although Joss Whedon praised Donald Sutherland's abilities as an actor, he called his behavior very rude.
Interesting.
But now that we know that Joss Whedon is a dick and was a complete egomaniac on all of his sets and a complete control freak,
right,
that actually says more about Donald Sutherland not getting along. That's a compliment to Donald Sutherland.
I would say so. Absolutely.
So it's okay.
Yeah, completely justified.
Yes. And speaking of early credits of some famous actors, Seth Green makes a very small appearance in this movie, which is quite funny because he was a series regular on Buffy the Vampire Slayer for several seasons.
Real? Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. There's a lot of people on Buffy.
Oh, yeah, tons. Nathan Fillion makes one of his first appearances on that show as well. There's a lot of people, and Seth Green actually plays a vampire for a very short scene in this film, but you can catch him because of his hair.
I don't think I caught it.
It was towards the end, and it's like 1 second. It was almost cut completely from the movie, but
oh, wow.
You enjoyed Hilary Swank. This is actually her first movie credit.
Very cool.
Yeah, and for those of us over 30, short from 40, and also beyond, a lot of us remember Pee Wee Herman being arrested.
Yes.
Which, now that we're older, and now that we're all out of the 90s, we realize how stupid that arrest was.
Yeah.
And it was such a pearl-clutching moment in the 90s, but the 90s were full of those, so it makes sense that people flipped out. But now, looking back, we realize how much of a nothing burger that was. And this was actually Paul Rubin's first major film role after his arrest. So it was a big deal for him to be back at work. Yeah. He had a very small role in Batman Returns where he has a just tiny little non-speaking role. He plays Penguin's father in the very beginning of the film. And so,
I guess I don't remember that.
Yeah. And they toss him off the bridge in the little carriage.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yes. Now that you said that, I completely remember that. Yeah.
And Paul Rubin decided to have long hair and a goatee based on his infamous mugshot from 1991 because, according to him, it was the coolest I've ever looked. So I'm glad he just embraced that mugshot and was like, fuck it.
Yeah, for sure.
And lastly, I want to say, and this gives us a good opportunity to mention someone that we love mentioning on this show.
Oh.
Mick Jagger, Carrie Elwes, and David Bowie
Oh, yeah.
were all set to make cameos as vampires, but they were cut due to time and budgetary issues.
Oh, darn.
Yeah, so unfortunately...
That would have been cool.
That would have been really fun to see those guys as vampires.
That would have been pretty awesome.
Yes.
Yeah, David Bowie in red lipstick. Mick Jagger in red lipstick.
I mean, we've seen that before, I'm sure.
Yes, we have, yeah. Oh, I can only imagine.
And Christy Swanson, I'm glad you're a fan. She was also in Ferris Bueller. She had a very small part.
Okay.
She was in the scene in Ben Stein's classroom, and he's asking for Bueller, and she goes, "Oh, my cousin's sister's boyfriend's best friend said that Ferris Bueller's going to die or whatever." And she goes on that whole long thing. That's actually Christy Swanson. And she's also in this awesome early 90s comic book movie with Billy Zane called The Phantom. It's guilty pleasure of mine because most 90s comic book movies are guilty pleasures of mine. And she's very beautiful, and it's set in the early 1900s, so she's got great costumes. It's really fun.
Oh, all right. I have not. I don't think I've seen The Phantom since it came out. I think I even just watched it on TV. I barely remember it.
Yeah, that's fair. She's also in Big Daddy and Dude, Where's My Car?
Dude, Where's My Car? Yes, she is.
I figured you'd recognize her from Dude, Where's My Car?
Yeah. Christy Boner.
Oh, God. Is that her name in the film?
Yes, it is. Dude, it's Christy Boner.
Poor girl.
Hey, she embraced it, too.
Good.
Gosh.
And Donald Sutherland playing Merrick in this movie, he had 199 credits in his life.
Wow.
He was born on July 17th, 1935, and as you said, he just passed away on June 20th, 2004 at the age of 88.
Yes.
He almost made it to his 89th birthday, and here are some of the other credits he had. The Dirty Dozen.
Oh, hey.
That's popped up in the last 3 or 4 episodes in a row for some reason.
Yeah, it really has.
He also starred in the movie MASH, Kelly's Heroes, as we said.
Yes.
Clute, which actually launched Jane Fonda's career, and they had a torrid love affair for about a year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were really in love with each other, and then they broke up, and they were both really sad about it. But she just posted a really nice tribute to him.
Yeah, that's awesome.
He was also in The Great Train Robbery, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which is an awesome horror movie. I watched it as a little kid at my grandma's house, and it scared the ever-loving shit out of me, and it might be might have to be one of my picks this October. He's also in the movies Ordinary People, Backdraft, JFK, Outbreak, A Time to Kill, The Art of War, which is a Wesley Snipes movie that isn't terrible.
Oh, yeah. I remember the trailer for that. I never saw it.
Yeah, I've seen it a couple times back when it first came out. He is also in The Italian Job, which I really wanted to pick because I love that movie, but he's only in it for a couple minutes, so it would be the wrong movie this week at least.
Yeah.
He was in my pick of Pride and Prejudice just 2 weeks ago, so we just talked about it.
Yes, he was.
And lastly, he plays President Snow in the Hunger Games series.
Ah, I've seen the first Hunger Games. I know we've talked about that before.
He's so menacing in those films. He's so good as a bad guy.
Really?
Oh, he was so creepy.
I don't remember at all.
It might be worth rewatching the first Hunger Games just to watch him in it. He's so good.
Yeah, maybe. I could get behind that. And I have come around to J-Law over the last several years.
There you go. Especially with No Hard Feelings, right?
Well, yeah.
That movie's hilarious.
Yes, it is.
And in 2018, Donald Sutherland received an honorary Oscar.
That's fantastic.
Oh, and let's not forget Kiefer Sutherland is his son, who also appeared in a vampire movie because he was a vampire in The Lost Boys.
Which I have not seen.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So they've both been in vampire films.
Very cool.
And Buffy the Vampire Slayer was made for $7 million.
Wow. All right. It looks like it was made for about $100,000.
Oh, come on now. 300 at least, right?
Okay. All right. Fine. $300,000. $200 a day for the second AD.
There you go. And in the United States, it actually pulled in $17 million at the box office. So it did really well.
Shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then it got really popular on VHS and then DVD subsequently. So
yeah, people are big fans of it.
It's a cult classic now for sure.
Absolutely.
And so that's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, starring Donald Sutherland, one of his unsung roles. I really loved him in this movie as Merrick, and if you want to give it a shot, you can rent Buffy the Vampire Slayer on most streaming services.
That's what I did.
Great. Well, I'm glad you were entertained by it, and sometimes it's really nice just diving into a campy film.
I agree. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. We don't do a whole lot of campy movies on Movies You Miss podcast.
We don't.
We might have to change that. But yeah, again, enjoyable.
Good. I'm so glad you had a good time with it. And again, thank you so much for suggesting we dedicate an episode to Donald Sutherland, especially because he's not one of those actors that we really talk about that often, but then you start looking at his credits and realize how many movies he's in that you're a really big fan of.
Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
And so that is our Audible episode dedicated to Donald Sutherland. Thank you all so much for joining us this week. Next week, we are celebrating the 4th of July.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody knows what you've picked already. Because
I don't think they do.
I mean, if anybody was going to guess at what 4th of July movie John would pick, they would probably guess correctly.
I think you're absolutely right.
So why don't you tell all the fine folks what you're choosing for next week?
Oh, okay, sure. Yes, I absolutely will. I am choosing one of the greatest science fiction films I've ever seen, and that I'm sure the world has ever seen, because everybody loves this movie. If you don't, there is clearly something wrong with you. This movie is written by Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich, directed by Roland Emmerich, starring Will Smith, Bill Pullman, Jeff Goldblum, Judd Hirsch, Robert Loggia, and Randy Quaid. This is Independence Day, everybody. It's taken us 115 episodes to get to one of my other top 5 favorite movies of all time. Just like Jurassic Park and Men in Black, I know this movie from the very first line to the final line, all the way through its entire 2 hours and 25 minutes. I love this movie. I cannot wait to do it. And if you haven't seen it, you're in for a treat, because it is one of the greatest movies of all time. And you can watch it on any streaming service for $3.99. I will be watching my Blu-ray copy because I do not yet have the 4K copy. Only because it has not yet come out.
Oh, I was going to say, there's got to be a good reason.
Yeah, that's the only reason. So get ready for a good time. V, what are you choosing?
Funny enough, I also chose a movie that's 2 hours and 25 minutes long.
Wonderful.
But it's the polar opposite of yours, in fact, because this is an unapologetic expose of the lie that was perpetrated for the Vietnam War. This is one of Tom Cruise's best roles of his entire career, directed by Oliver Stone. This is Born on the 4th of July.
I have never seen it. I'm very much looking forward to it.
I'm really excited to introduce this movie to you. It is my second Tom Cruise pick. And I'm excited to celebrate just about his entire filmography on this show over the next couple of years. But this movie is really fantastic. It is definitely harrowing and certainly a movie you should prepare yourself for. It's very intense. And if you want to follow along, it's currently streaming on Netflix.
Oh, awesome. That's where I will watch it then.
There you go. Well, all right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, please rate, review, and subscribe to our show. It's so important, and we do really appreciate it. Just scroll down a little bit and hit those 5 stars on Apple Podcasts while you're listening to our voices. And if you write us a review, we will send you a sticker.
Yes, we will.
And as always, we like to end the podcast with film is a form of art, and in art, every opinion is valid. Except if you think
Donald Sutherland was American.
Haha, yes, that man was gifted to us from Canada, apparently.
Yeah, the Great White North.
Rest in peace, Donald.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for all the good times.
Hope.
Hope?
Hope. It is the only thing stronger than fear.